Before we proceed, there's one name missing from this list, the CEO said, and that was the moment my stepmother's smile finally broke. The conference room on the 42nd floor was all glass and steel, the kind of place where decisions weren't just made, they were recorded, archived, and remembered. 12 board members sat around the table, each with a leather folder, each with a vote that could shift millions of dollars in seconds. Victoria Hale sat perfectly still beside her daughter Chloe, dressed in ivory and confidence like this was already theirs. The transfer documents had been circulated, signed, and reviewed. My father's company, his shares, now under Chloe's name, clean. Official. Final. At least that's what they thought. I stood near the back wall, hands empty, expression neutral. I didn't interrupt, I didn't argue, I didn't even sit down. I had learned a long time ago that speaking too early only gives people time to prepare their defense. And Victoria was always prepared. All equity allocations have been finalized, one of the attorneys said, tapping his pen against the page. Miss Hale's daughter now holds majority interest. There it was, said out loud. Documented, accepted. Around the table, heads nodded. A few glances were thrown my way, brief, dismissive, like I was already part of the past. If you've ever been quietly erased from something that was supposed to be yours, you'll understand exactly what that feels like. And if this kind of story pulls you in, take a second to like and subscribe. It helps more than you think. I kept my eyes on the table, not on Victoria, not on Chloe, on the folder. The one placed in front of the CEO, thick, untouched, deliberate. He didn't open it right away. Instead, he leaned back slightly, scanning the room like he was measuring something no one else could see. Before we proceed, he said, again, slower. This time we need to correct something. A small shift. That was all it took. Victoria's fingers tightened around her pen. Chloe's smile held, but just barely. I didn't move. I didn't need to. Because for the first time since this meeting began, they weren't looking at each other. They were looking at him. And he was looking at me. The air in the room shifted in a way that no one could explain out loud, but everyone could feel. It was subtle, like the pressure dropping before a storm. Victoria straightened in her chair, her posture still flawless, but there was a delay now, a fraction of a second before every movement, as if she was recalculating. Chloe glanced at her just once, quick and uncertain, then fixed her eyes back on the table like she had been trained to do. I had seen that look before. It was the look of someone who had always been told everything would be handled for them. The CEO finally opened the folder in front of him. Not quickly, not dramatically. Just a slow, deliberate motion like he had all the time in the world. Paper against leather. A quiet sound, but it carried. He flipped one page, then another, his expression unreadable, controlled, practiced. These documents, he said, his voice even were submitted as part of the final transfer. The attorney beside him nodded immediately. Yes, everything has been verified and signed. The ownership change is legally binding. Legally binding. The words settled heavily in the room. Final, clean, irreversible. That was the narrative. That was the version they had built. I watched Victoria's reflection in the glass wall across from us. Not directly, never directly. Her chin was still lifted, her lips pressed into that same composed line she always wore in public. But her eyes were sharper now, locked onto the folder, not the CEO. She was not listening anymore. She was anticipating. That was her strength. She always moved one step ahead, or at least she thought she did. There is just one issue, the CEO continued, turning another page. No one spoke, no one interrupted, even the small movements stopped. Pens rested, hands stilled, breathing slowed. It was that kind of silence, the kind that does not ask for attention but takes it anyway. I remained where I was near the wall, just outside the circle of power. That was where I had been placed years ago, not officially, not with words, but with decisions, with signatures, with quiet exclusions that no one ever explained. I understood my position long before this meeting. I understood it the night my father first introduced Victoria at our dining table, the way she smiled at me like I was already part of the past. I understood it when Chloe moved into the house and my name slowly disappeared from conversations that mattered. And I understood it the day the company stopped copying me on internal reports. That was the moment. No argument, no confrontation, just silence. I said nothing. I adjusted. I watched. And I waited. Because systems like this do not break from the outside. They collapse from within. The CEO closed the folder halfway, his fingers resting on the edge as he looked up again. This time, directly across the room, not at Victoria, not at Chloe, but through them past them until his gaze settled exactly where I was standing. The CEO did not say my name yet, but the room already knew something had shifted, the kind of shift that does not come from emotion, but from structure, from something written down long before anyone in that room thought to question it. He tapped the corner of the document once, not loudly, just enough to mark a point. This transfer references a controlling trust, he said, his tone steady, almost indifferent, like he was reading from a manual instead of dismantling a conclusion. The attorney leaned forward, immediately flipping through his own copy faster, this time less confident. That trust was dissolved, he replied a little too quickly. All assets were consolidated under Mr. Carter prior to the reallocation. Dissolved. Consolidated. Clean words. Professional words. Words that make things disappear without anyone noticing what was taken. I had heard them before. I heard them the week my father stopped coming into the office. I heard them in the hallway, outside his hospital room, when Victoria spoke in low, controlled sentences to people who nodded without asking questions. Everything is being handled, she had said back then, the same way she said it about the house, the accounts, the schedule, the future. Always the future. Never the details. I remembered standing in that hallway holding my phone, watching emails come through that no longer included me. Internal memos, board updates, financial summaries. All sent, all received, just not by me. No explanation, no confrontation, just absence. I did not fight it, I did not ask, I learned to read what was not said. That was how survival worked in that house. That was how it worked in that company. The trust cannot be dissolved unilaterally, the CEO continued, turning another page slower now, like he wanted every second to land. Not under the original terms. A pause followed. Not long. Just enough. Victoria's pen stopped moving. Chloe's hand tightened around the edge of the table, her knuckles pale against the polished wood. Across the room, one of the board members adjusted his glasses, leaning closer, like the words had suddenly become heavier. I stayed where I was, my back straight, my hands still empty. I had nothing to show. Not yet. I did not need to. The truth was already in the room. It had been sitting there the entire time, printed, signed, filed away, waiting for someone with the authority to say it out loud. According to this, the CEO said, lifting a single page slightly above the rest, the primary beneficiary was never removed. The sentence landed without emphasis, without force, and yet it carried more weight than anything said before it. No one spoke. No one moved. For a moment, the entire room seemed to forget how to respond to something that did not fit the version they had already accepted. Victoria was the first to react. Not with words, not with anger. Just a slight shake of her head. Almost imperceptible, like she was rejecting the premise itself. That was her instinct. Control the narrative, deny the fracture. But this was not a conversation. This was documentation. And documentation does not negotiate. The CEO lowered the page back onto the folder and looked up again, this time with no distance left in his gaze, no hesitation, no room for interpretation. And finally, he spoke directly to me. Emily Carter, the CEO, said, and for the first time that morning, my name existed in that room again. It did not echo. It did not need to. It landed exactly where it was supposed to. Victoria's head turned sharply, not toward me, but toward him, like she had misheard something she could not afford to misunderstand. Chloe blinked once, twice, her expression losing its polish in small, unguarded fragments. Around the table, the board members shifted in their seats. Not dramatically, just enough to acknowledge that the structure they had accepted minutes ago was no longer stable. I did not move. I did not step forward. I did not correct anyone. I simply met his gaze calm, measured the same way I had learned to observe everything else in that room. According to the original trust agreement, he continued, his voice steady, all controlling shares were placed under a protected structure that required dual authorization for any modification. He paused, just long enough for the words to settle. One of those authorizations was never obtained. Silence followed. Not confusion. Not yet. Just silence. The attorney reached for his documents again. Faster now, flipping pages, with less precision, less certainty. "That is not accurate," he said, but his voice no longer carried the same weight. "We have signed transfer records." Signed. That word again. Always signed, always presented as final. I had seen those signatures. I had studied them long before this meeting, long before anyone thought to include me again. "Signatures alone do not override trust conditions," the CEO replied without raising his voice. "Not when the structure explicitly prevents unilateral action." Victoria leaned forward slightly, her composure still intact, but thinner, now stretched over something less certain. "Then perhaps there is a misunderstanding," she said smoothly, her tone controlled, practiced. The same tone she used in every room where she expected compliance. "All actions were taken in my husband's best interest." Best interest. Another clean phrase. Another justification that removed detail. The CEO did not respond to her directly. Instead, he turned one more page and slid the document across the table, not toward her, not toward the attorney, but toward the center, where everyone could see it. "The trust names a primary beneficiary," he said. And that designation was never amended. No one reached for the page. No one needed to. The words were already clear. I could feel the weight of it shift not in the room, but in the way people held themselves, in the way their attention moved, in the way certainty began to dissolve into something quieter, something more careful. Victoria's fingers tightened slightly against the table, her knuckles whitening just enough to notice if you were looking for it. Chloe's gaze dropped, then lifted again, searching for something to hold on to, something familiar, something stable. There was none. I had stood in that same position years ago, searching for the same thing. I had learned what happens when it is not there. The CEO closed the folder halfway again, his hand resting on top of it, anchoring the moment. "The beneficiary," he said, his eyes returning to me with no hesitation left, "is still present." No one asked who the beneficiary was. They did not need to. The room had already begun to understand piece by piece without anyone daring to say it first. Victoria was the only one still holding on to the version she had built, her posture straight, her expression controlled, but there was something underneath it now, something thinner, something that did not quite hold. "This is a misinterpretation," she said, her voice measured but sharper than before. The documents were reviewed by legal counsel. Everything was executed properly, another word designed to end discussion, but the discussion had already moved past her. The CEO did not look at her when he responded. He did not need to. "Execution does not equal validity," he said, "not when foundational conditions are ignored." The attorney shifted again, clearing his throat, trying to recover ground that was no longer there. "Even if there was an oversight," he said, "the intent was clearly to transfer control to Miss Hale's daughter." Intent. That word lingered for a moment, then dissolved just as quickly. Intent did not matter here, not in this room, not on paper. I had learned that long ago. I stepped forward then. Not quickly, not dramatically, just one step enough to move out of the shadow of the wall and into the line of sight of the table. Every eye followed, not because I demanded it, because the structure demanded it now. "Intent was never part of the agreement," I said, my voice calm, steady, the same tone I had used in rooms far less forgiving than this one. "The trust was written to prevent exactly this kind of transfer." No one interrupted. No one corrected me. The silence was different now. Not dismissive. Not indifferent. It was listening. Victoria turned toward me fully for the first time, her eyes sharp, calculating, searching for something she could still control. "You were not involved in these decisions," she said, her voice lower, more direct. "You left the company." Left. That was the story she told. That I walked away. That I chose absence. I held her gaze just long enough. I was removed from access, I replied. Not from ownership. The words settled into the space between us, clean, precise, impossible to soften. Across the table, one of the board members leaned forward, finally reaching for the document the CEO had placed at the center. Another followed. Pages turned. Lines were traced. Signatures examined. The narrative was breaking not loudly, not all at once, but in quiet, irreversible ways. Chloe shifted in her seat, her confidence unraveling in small, visible movements, her eyes moving between her mother and the papers in front of her, searching for confirmation that no longer existed. There was none. The CEO closed the folder completely this time, his hand resting firmly on top of it, marking the end of speculation. "The transfer cannot proceed," he said. Not loud, not dramatic. Final. The room absorbed it in silence. And for the first time since this meeting began, no one looked at Victoria for direction. They looked at me. No one spoke after that. Not immediately. The kind of silence that followed was not confusion anymore. It was recognition. Slow, deliberate recognition of something that had been ignored too long to be accidental. One of the board members cleared his throat, but he did not say anything. Another leaned back in his chair, eyes still fixed on the documents spread across the table as if reading them again might somehow change what they said. It did not. Victoria did not sit back. She did not withdraw. She leaned forward instead, both hands placed flat against the polished surface, her composure still intact, but no longer effortless. "This company cannot operate under uncertainty," she said, her voice controlled, but there was a sharp edge, now something less rehearsed. "If there are technical discrepancies, they can be resolved internally without disrupting leadership. Discrepancies." That was what she called it now. Not invalid, not unauthorized, just a detail. Something small, something manageable. I had heard that tone before. The way she reduced things that mattered into something that sounded temporary. The CEO did not respond right away. He let the words sit there, unchallenged, for just long enough to make it lose its weight on its own. Then he spoke. "This is not a discrepancy," he said. "This is a structural violation of the governing trust." The difference was clear. One could be fixed. The other could not. Victoria held his gaze for a second, longer than necessary, then shifted her attention back to the board, searching for alignment, for support, for someone willing to reinforce the version she had built. But no one moved toward her. No one spoke. The distance was already there. Chloe looked down at her hands, her fingers tightening slightly as she pulled them back into her lap, as if removing them from the table could somehow remove her from the situation. It did not. I stepped forward another inch, just enough to close the gap between where I had been and where I was supposed to be. Not at the wall, not outside the table, not anymore. "The trust outlines enforcement," I said, my voice steady, each word placed carefully, deliberately. "Any unauthorized transfer triggers an automatic review and reversion." I did not raise my tone. I did not emphasize the last word. I did not need to. Reversion. It settled into the room with a quiet finality. The CEO nodded once, not in agreement, but in confirmation. "That is correct," he said. "And that process has now been initiated. Initiated. Not debated, not pending, already in motion." The board members exchanged brief glances, subtle, controlled, but unmistakable. The direction had changed. The structure had corrected itself. Victoria's hand shifted slightly on the table, just enough to reveal the tension she had been holding back. For the first time, she did not have a response ready. And for the first time, she did not control the outcome. I looked at the folder one last time, then back at the room, at the people who had already begun adjusting their positions without saying a word. I did not smile. I did not react. I simply stood there where I had always belonged, waiting for the system to finish what it had already started. The word initiated did not echo, but it spread quietly, precisely through every person in that room, changing the way they sat, the way they looked at the documents, the way they looked at me. It was no longer about what had happened. It was about what would happen next. One of the senior board members, a man who had not spoken once since the meeting began, finally leaned forward and placed both hands on the table. "Then we need to suspend the transfer immediately," he said. His voice measured but firm. Not a suggestion, a direction. Another voice followed, then another, each one careful, each one controlled, but all moving in the same direction now. The alignment was quiet, but it was absolute. Victoria's gaze moved from one face to another, searching, recalculating, trying to find a point where the structure might still hold. There was none. The shift had already happened. "This is premature," she said, her tone tightening, despite her effort to keep it steady. "You are reacting to a procedural detail without considering the broader implications for the company." Broader implications. Another attempt to expand the frame to move attention away from the document and into something less defined, less provable. But no one followed her there. The CEO closed the folder fully this time and placed it flat on the table, both hands resting on top of it, anchoring the outcome in place. "The broader implication," he said calmly, "is that the company's controlling shares are currently assigned outside of valid authority." He let the sentence settle, not pushing it, not repeating it. He did not need to. The board understood. The attorney said nothing now. His pen rested untouched beside his folder. Chloe shifted again, her posture no longer composed, her shoulders slightly drawn inward, as if she were trying to make herself smaller in a space that had just grown too large. I watched it happen without reacting. Not because I did not feel it, but because I had already felt all of this long before today. The exclusion, the quiet removal, the assumption that I would not return, that I would not matter, that I would not be named. I had learned to exist without recognition. That was why I could stand here now without needing it. One of the board members turned slightly in his chair, his attention moving fully toward me for the first time, not as an afterthought, not as a formality, but as a necessity. "Miss Carter," he said, "careful, deliberate. Given the trust structure, you would be required to participate in any further governance decisions regarding these shares." Required. Not optional, not invited, required. The word held its own weight. I met his gaze steady, without hesitation. "I understand," I said. "No more, no less." Across the table, Victoria's hand lifted slightly, then lowered again as if she had started to speak, and then stopped herself before the words could form. That was new. That hesitation, that absence of control. The CEO gave a small nod, not to me, not to her, but to the room itself, signaling the shift had been acknowledged, accepted, recorded. "Then we will proceed accordingly," he said. And just like that, the meeting did not end, but it changed. Completely. The room did not return to normal after that. It recalibrated, quietly, precisely. The kind of shift that does not need announcements, because everyone feels it in the way decisions start forming before they are spoken. The CEO remained seated, his hands still resting on the closed folder, but his attention had already moved forward beyond the transfer, beyond the disruption, into what came next. "We will need to review all actions taken under the assumption of this transfer," he said. His tone even procedural, but there was no uncertainty left in it. "Effective immediately, all related authority is suspended pending verification." Suspended. Another clean word, another irreversible step. Around the table, notes were being made now. Not casually. Not for record keeping. For alignment. For protection. The company was already adjusting itself around the correction. Victoria did not write anything down. She sat still, her posture unchanged, but her focus had narrowed, sharpened into something quieter, something more deliberate. She was not reacting anymore. She was calculating again. That was what she did best. Chloe, on the other hand, did not move at all. Her hands remained in her lap, her shoulders slightly drawn in her eyes, no longer scanning the room but fixed on a single point on the table, as if looking anywhere else might force her to accept something she was not ready to understand. I stepped fully into the space now, no longer near the wall, no longer outside the table's perimeter. No one questioned it, no one redirected me. The structure had already made room. One of the board members slid a folder toward me, not the same one the CEO held, but another, thinner, prepared quickly, efficiently. "We will need your acknowledgement on interim governance," he said, his voice careful, respectful, in a way it had not been before. Acknowledgement, not permission, not approval, recognition of position. I placed my hand lightly on the folder but did not open it yet. I did not rush. I did not need to. Timing mattered here. It always had. Across from me, Victoria finally spoke again, her voice lower, now more controlled than before, stripped of its earlier certainty. "This can still be resolved without escalation," she said, directing the words not at me but at the room, at the system, as if it might still bend. "There is no need to involve external review." External review. That was what she feared. Not the room, not the board, something beyond it. The CEO's response was immediate, not louder, not sharper, just absolute. "The review process is already in motion," he said. "It is not optional. Not optional." The phrase settled heavily, closing the last space where negotiation might have existed. Victoria's fingers pressed briefly against the edge of the table, then relaxed, the smallest sign of tension finally surfacing. Chloe did not look up. The board members continued writing, aligning, adjusting, moving forward without pause. I opened the folder in front of me, then slowly, deliberately, and for the first time since this meeting began, I did not feel like I was stepping into something new. I was stepping back into something that had always been mine. The pages inside the folder were clean, precise, structured in a way that left no room for interpretation, only confirmation. Interim governance authority, voting rights restoration, enforcement acknowledgement. Each line aligned with what had already been said, what had already been proven, what the room had already accepted without needing to argue it further. I read them once slowly, then closed the folder halfway, my hand resting lightly on top of it. I did not sign immediately. Not because I doubted it, because I understood what this moment was. Across the table, the board had already moved on to the next phase, discussing timelines, compliance steps, external verification procedures. The company was not waiting. It was adjusting, realigning itself around the structure that had always been there, even when it was ignored. Victoria sat back slightly, now no longer leaning forward, no longer directing the room, her posture still composed, but no longer commanding. The difference was subtle, but it was there. Control had shifted, not taken, returned. Chloe finally looked up, her eyes moving across the table, searching for something familiar, something stable, but finding only distance, process, consequence. No one was looking at her anymore, not as the future, not as the center, just as part of a situation being corrected. I lifted my pen, then turning it once between my fingers, feeling the weight of it, the simplicity of it. For years, decisions had been made without me, around me, over me, all justified by silence, by absence, by assumptions that I would not step back into the room. I said nothing then. I said nothing now. The difference was, this time the system spoke for me. I signed. One line. Clean. Final. The sound of the pen against paper was quiet, almost insignificant, but it carried further than anything else said that morning. The CEO gave a small nod, not in approval, but in acknowledgement that the process had completed its first step. "We will proceed with full review," he said, already, turning to the next document, already moving forward. No ceremony, no pause. That was how real authority worked. It did not celebrate. It continued. I closed the folder completely and placed it back on the table, exactly where it belonged. I did not look at Victoria. I did not need to. The room had already done that for me. The board had already adjusted. The structure had already corrected itself. And for the first time in a long time, I was not standing outside of it. I was part of it, exactly where I had always been meant to be. If you have ever been placed outside something that was rightfully yours, comment 1. If you have ever seen a story like this unfold in another family, comment 2. And if you never want to find yourself in a position like this, comment 3 or share your own thoughts. I did not take anything back. It was never theirs.